Strike the Terran clause. It reads like a farmer's spellbook. The voice came from Council Chair Ralvith Keen, taloned fingers tapping the tribunal dais as he scanned the hardlight summary flickering across his chair's armrest. The text, parsed and color-tagged by the chamber's legislative filters, cast pale red glyphs against the inner curve of the dome. Draven Kor didn't flinch. Across the polished amphitheater floor, he remained seated, hands still, spine aligned, expression unreadable. The Terran seat was bare of ornament. No banners, no delegation, just Kor. And beside him, a single archival case, flat, black, locked. Above, the Council's atmospheric regulators hissed with the dryness of sterilized air, neutral, almost medicinal. The kind of cold that erased scent entirely. Nothing lingered here, not the perfume of other worlds, not even trace moisture. It was a room built to strip presence. Item 12, Earth, continued Keen, now addressing the administrative scribe, submitted under Treaty Marn Code 66-obsolete. Protocol deems it ceremonial. Mark it null, proceed. A few of the councilors chuckled, dry nasal bursts. No malice, just the laziness of power. Kor's eyes lifted slightly. Not toward Keen, but the wide arc of observers tiered above the main table. Dozens of species watched, many blinking in asynchronous patterns, some swaying gently in high-grav chairs. None looked back. Chair, said the administrative scribe, a thin-boned Kravari male with transparent eyelids. Should we at least tag Earth's submission for archival per Peace Clause 12? Keen clicked his beak once. Waste of archive storage. If Earth has something worth hearing, it should learn how to title a proposal without quoting equations. A murmur of agreement flowed through the room. The Terran file hadn't been reviewed. Not truly. The Council's summary parser had flagged the opening as derivative of pre-fusion fieldwork, the kind used by colonies before they joined the stellar lattice network. The included equations didn't match standard formatting. Its title, Phase Drift in Entropic Cores, a multi-phase corrective proposal, had been cross-listed against known patterns. No match. Low priority. Ignored. Core remained still. One of the auxiliary feeds displayed a cross-sectional animation of a star system undergoing stabilization drift, just a model for visual decor, meant to echo the day's agenda on lattice maintenance reform. Behind it, laser plasma displays shimmered faint gold. A board official tapped through icon sets, not realizing Earth's submission used that exact star model in its predictive data. Below the display, the Terran flag lay folded in a rigid triangle beside the case. It had not been unfolded since Kor entered. No ceremonial handoff, no greeting, a small gesture, but intentional. One tier up, Tavrin Kell watched without moving. The system's cartographer had attended in silence, seated among the technical observers. His hands were clasped behind his back, gaze flicking between Kor and the tribunal panel. His jaw tightened once, then eased. His posture didn't betray concern, but he noticed something no one else did. Kor never blinked during Keen's entire dismissal. That wasn't an emotional reaction. That was control. Below, Keen had moved on. Item 13, Proposed Upgrade Schedules for Generic Orbital Rings. Speaker Arvel, you may begin. The lights shifted. A new counselor stood. A presentation began. Kor slowly exhaled, inaudible, invisible. His right hand drifted to the edge of the archival case, but did not open it. He didn't need to. In truth, the case didn't hold the patch. The real delivery had already happened. Years ago, the firmware fragments had been dispersed quietly, embedded within comms infrastructure upgrades offered to smaller border systems in Earth's name. Minor improvements in packet clarity, signal compression, waveform stabilization. No one had asked why Earth, dismissed from major council systems, still donated tech. No one ever suspected Terran analog engineering could hold anything valuable. They just took the help, and never looked again. Kor sat back, not in resignation, but calculation. 1 seat away, Rusk Meriden leaned forward slightly, barely visible behind council lighting, buried in the shadowed trench reserved for low-clearance observers. He didn't need to be seen. He was here to confirm one thing. The phrase marked null had just been entered into the binding quorum record, which meant the fail-safe had started ticking. Earth's patch didn't need activation. It needed admission. Murek Solon, Elsewhere in a dry orbital station 3 jumps away, reviewed Earth's analog phase decay models, ones built from low-interference grav lens readings gathered manually over 74 years. He already knew what was coming. Earth had shown its hand, disguised as ceremony, then left the council to fold it. Core adjusted a sleeve cuff, a minor detail, but it triggered the edge of his diplomatic ID badge to catch light, casting a sharp white gleam across the chamber floor. Keen noticed it. He frowned, briefly, then shrugged. The next speaker began outlining orbital ring budgets, their species blinking 2 eyes vertically instead of horizontally. The words blurred into numeric projections, sector estimates, rotating resource tiers. It would go unnoticed that Earth's proposal had projected a phase drift pattern nearly identical to the decay recently noted in Sector Varos Prime. 1 or 2 council aides might mention it later in a quiet footnote. Nothing urgent, nothing alarming. Not yet. Core stood without sound. The folded flag remained on the chair. The case stayed closed. He didn't ask for permission, nor was he given a send-off. The chamber didn't pause, and yet as he walked out, the sensors embedded in the corridor wall silently recorded a biometric anomaly. Not Core's vitals, the environment's, heat displacement, air ion shift, microflux in data flow, an unquantified disturbance, so minor it triggered no alarms. But it had never happened before in that corridor, not once. Back inside the tribunal, Ralvith Keen finally tapped the clear item glyph on his interface, removing Earth's submission from the agenda. The council moved on, unaware they had just refused the only correction ever written for the collapse already underway, unaware that silence was no longer diplomatic. It was structural and irreversible, until they spoke the words. If Earth's still charting stars with brass coils and mirrors, I'll eat my title medallion. Vorik Senel's voice crackled across the chamber feed, the kind of snide confidence cultivated by decades of tenure. The council's head of astroharmonic systems leaned back in his seated span chair, tendrils flexing in amusement as rows of delegates indulged in faint, synchronized laughter. His statement wasn't rhetorical. It was ritual, performed like so many before it in these chambers. A stream of data scrolled behind him on the wide laser plasma display, thermal dissipation curves, lattice vibrational consistency reports, energy phase tallies, all glowing in cool blue against the curved black wall of the orbital sector diagnostics hub. Earth's submission, marked Legacy Interferometry Logs 074, A Kel, remained unopened on the lower display quadrant. A small triangular icon pulsed amber, unreviewed. He gestured to it dismissively. They used ground-fixed analog lenses calibrated by dewdrop drift. The submission's timestamp predates sector standard phase integrators by nearly 2 decades. Yet they claim drift detection across council-grade lattice nodes, an aide replied, tone flat. Vorik smirked. They also claim their crust-locked arrays read substellar entropy through ionized air wobble. It's not measurement, it's mythology. No one disputed him. No one even checked. On Earth, inside a dusk-lit observatory, buried beneath the Caloran Ridge, Tavrin Kel adjusted the calibration ring of a mounted waveguide. The equipment looked ancient, composite housing scratched from salt air friction, clamps hand-tightened with physical torque, rather than servo pressure. The glass lens hadn't been replaced in 14 years, but when he dialed in the phase angle, a shift occurred, not in the hardware, but in the numbers bleeding slowly across the connected interface. Entropy climb, 0.0047, gain over 6 days. He blinked once, logged it, and whispered, another one. A red indicator blinked on the overhead relay bank, not an alert, just a confirmation of passive packet echo from System V Drift Core. That made 4. He didn't speak to anyone. He didn't need to. He stood, logged the new coordinate into the secure relay. The data wouldn't transmit directly. It was wrapped, encoded, and tagged with the dormant key. A copy would go to Murik Solon, another to the dormant Terran ledgers seeded throughout the border relay chains. The observatory's ventilation system purred behind him, air dense with the scent of oxidized copper and resin from sealed fiber tubes. Not unpleasant, just real, tangible. His boots creaked against the floor, polymer over-treated stone, deliberately unfinished to absorb vibration. Every element in this room had purpose, every silence, meaning. Murik Solon stood over a suspended feedback table aboard Relay Node 9 Zan. The chamber around him glowed pale green, cast by rows of embedded indicators in the core. Each readout marked stable, except for one, flickering with faint variability. It wasn't failing. It was waking. He leaned closer, eyes narrowing. One by one, dormant Terran packet structures embedded in the relay firmware began responding, not to commands, but to signatures. Drift resonance. Each barely met the activation margin, but collectively, they formed a pattern. He tapped a surface console, fingers brushing the haptic grid. The system displayed a reverse tree trace of dormant firmware code. The fragments were still inert. Earth's patch hadn't activated. Not technically, but something had shifted. The decay Earth warned about, it was real, not sudden, not cataclysmic. A slow tilt in the harmonic baseline of stars engineered to last billions of years. A tick in the heart of creation. Murik didn't panic. He simply reached for the sealed strip of Terran protocol that had arrived via diplomatic courier cycles ago, labeled, unreviewed, phase reversal contingency. He'd filed it without opening it. Everyone had. It was policy. Now, he placed it on the console, unsealed it, and whispered only 3 words, begin ghost map. The node pulsed once in response. Back in the council chamber, Vorik Senel had moved on to showing animations of recent lattice stabilizer upgrades across the Kyrian loop. The room glowed in smooth arcs of violet and blue, showing engineered fields around suns across dozens of star charts. Rotating vistas beamed between 3-dimensional frames, each illustrating harmony and longevity. We have no drift, he declared, only Terran delusions, filtered through nostalgic tech. One observer raised a hand, quiet, careful, a junior technician from the Ironian Commonwealth, small, hunched, with a voice that buzzed slightly at the ends of phrases. Sir, a Class A sun, in the Vedris band, just flagged minor harmonic jitter, not drift, but close. Could be calibration error, but Vorik waved a clawed hand. The Vedris band uses relay equipment we retrofitted with older. He paused. Terran protocols. The glitch is in their code, not ours. The heads-up display registered a system-wide nod. Consensus reached. The explanation held. The subject closed. The room resumed its rhythm. Decisions made. Votes recorded. Dismissals filed. The Terran packet logs remained unopened. Later, alone in a service lift, Vorik tapped a sequence into his personal console, drawing up the list of every system currently running mixed-source relay firmware. One entry blinked, a Terran diplomatic aid relay from 22 years prior, still listed as operational. His expression shifted, not concern, but mild curiosity. He muttered to himself, they've seeded more than arrogance. The lift doors closed, light dimmed. He stared at the screen, silent. Somewhere beneath his thoughts, the first thread of doubt took root. On Earth, Tavern Kell stood outside the observatory dome, letting the wind press against his collar. The sky was clean tonight. Stars flickered like needles, unsteady, whispering. He didn't look up. He looked down at the field log on his wristband, then closed it. The numbers didn't lie, but the council wouldn't see them. Not yet. Not until the entropy curve crested past deniability. He turned to descend the ridge, gravel crunching beneath his boots. Behind him, the lens dome recalibrated with slow precision. Real mirrors, real light. What they called outdated, Earth had kept alive. What they mocked, Earth used to see further. And what they would soon call impossible, Earth had already recorded, years ago, without a word. Why did it pulse blue before the detonation curve? The voice belonged to Norix Varl, senior lattice engineer for the Zaric Directorate, standing rigid in the central data ring of Observation Array Benthic 4. The projection above him glared with a fading sphere, hollowed from the inside, like a candle snuffed from the core. Zaric 7 had not exploded. It had inverted. Around him, technicians froze, some mid-sentence, others mid-step. No one spoke. The air inside the command deck felt sharpened, filtered through overactive scrubbers that now hissed louder than the usual background systems. Something was wrong, and the sensors knew before the staff did. "Get me a decay trace," Varl snapped. A nearby analyst swiped through the controls, palms damp, fingers slipping. A ring of diagnostic bands opened along the sidewall. laser plasma displays pulsing with accelerated frequency bands. The solar core's entropy map, normally a slow-rolling red tide, now resembled a whirlpool reversing direction. The outer layers remained intact for several moments. Then the phase ring collapsed inward, as though gravity itself had turned its back. No radiation burst, the analyst murmured. Because it didn't burn, Varl said, his voice tight. It folded, not spatial, harmonic. Another voice cut through the speaker array, raw, static-pierced. We've lost Varl Station 7. The stabilizer ring is gone, no detonation, just ceased. The console floor under Varl's boots trembled, not from impact, from feedback, an echo from a structure meant to buffer billions of tons of harmonic energy now returning nothing. A dead loop. He didn't ask for a moment of silence. There wasn't time. Contact the council. Emergency quorum. Now. The council chamber doors slid open 12 minutes later. Ralvith Keen's crest was already half flattened against his skull plate as he leaned into the tribunal dais. His assistants lined the inner circle, their display pads stacked with emergency entries, phase maps, cross-system warnings. Stellar field degradation from the core outward, one announced, tapping his badge to cast the readout onto the dome's upper loop. Heads-up displays shimmered to life, forming a synchronized band of data projections along the chamber walls. Zarek 7 blinked, vanished, then flashed with a cross-section view of its core. The structure was empty, void of radiant force. Still, no trace fusion. No signature radiation, only rotational aftershock. A ghost orbit. Keen squinted. Give me internal gravitic data. I want it broken by resonance. No gravwell displacement, the aide said, swallowing. Field integrity never breached. The anchor ring still orbits. Nothing. Then it wasn't destabilized. Keen muttered. It was overwritten, Varl said, stepping forward through the lower gate. Eyes turned. Varl's boots clicked across the stone in even cadence. His uniform bore ash and streaks from coolant spray, one sleeve scorched at the edge. He did not slow his approach. When he stopped beneath the tribunal, he stared directly at Keen. There was no mechanical failure. No reactor breach. The containment lattice didn't fracture, it rephased. Keen's fingers curled once around his seat's edge, meaning, someone rekeyed the star. Murmurs echoed across the tiers. One of the Eronian delegates blinked both sets of eyelids in confusion. That's not possible, Keen said. We hard-coded lattice harmonics. Interference requires direct access to multi-tier admin control, unless the harmonics themselves were flawed, Varl replied. And nobody ever caught it. Keen turned away for a moment, his crest twitching in disbelief. He gestured. Get Vorek Senel in here. Vorek arrived 4 minutes later, still buttoning the upper clasp of his deep indigo formal weave. His expression twisted when he saw the projections already cycling across the room. He didn't look at Varl. I assume you're here to pin entropy decay on theoretical mistakes. This isn't decay, Varl said. It's a pattern collapse. Vorek shook his head, stepping into the active projection field. His fingers cut through the display bands, dragging time markers, phase cycles, rotational spectra. There's no external driver, he said, pausing. No pulse, no compression spike, just a drop. Exactly, Varl responded. Keen raised his voice. Explain. Now, Varl inhaled once. There's only one scenario where a lattice collapses without physical instability. When the harmonic baseline of the stabilizer ring aligns with its own failure threshold. Vorek frowned. That's a design impossibility. Unless the flaw was embedded in the initial harmonic assumptions, Varl said, and no one questioned it. He let that hang in the air. On the upper display, the heads-up visuals now rotated to a new pattern, 12 suns across the fringe systems, showing early-stage harmonic wobble, not failure, not danger, but rhythm inconsistency. Keen's gaze tracked the names. His voice dropped. Why didn't we see this before? No one answered. Because the answer was Earth. In a monitoring station tucked between high-density ring layers of Sector Cairn, a junior technician named Salik Varus stared at a warning he didn't understand. A minor phase marker had shifted, barely a hundredths grade drift. His supervisor had logged out for break protocol. He stared at the screen, sweat dotting his brow ridge. He tapped a diagnostic overlay. The wave pattern wobbled, then settled. He reran it. Same result. A quiet log note pinged from Earth's relay firmware. Passive structure triggered. No action required. Varus blinked. He didn't know what that meant. Back in council chambers, Keen stood, forgoing his normal closing cadence. We initiate emergency lattice audit protocol. All systems flagged for entropy wobble. Will route data to the Joint Science Tribunal. One of the aides asked, "Shall I request analysis from Earth?" "No," Keen said sharply. "They failed to offer actionable data. They will not be brought in now." Varl tilted his head. "They did offer something. You marked it null." Keen didn't respond. A silence spread, not total, but pointed, functional. As Keen turned back to the dais, a technician patched in one final reading from Zarek 7, a broken phase coil, frozen mid-twist, drifting near the orbital debris, shaped like a twisted ring with its inner edge burned black. The image rotated slowly, then faded from the display. Data continued to scroll beneath it. Numbers without heat. A system now teaching the Council what it meant to ignore a warning disguised as humility. You don't get wave symmetry like this unless the source is known or planted. Rusk Meriden didn't raise his voice, but the temperature in the Council war room seemed to drop anyway. His hand hovered above the central console, index and middle fingers spread over the glowing resonance map. A heads-up display projected 12 waveform plots, each labeled with a collapsed system's ID. One by one he called them into alignment. The overlays merged. The result, a harmonic contour resembling a fractured spiral, just as predicted in Earth's original submission. Not similar. Identical. "Where did that baseline come from?" asked Chair Keen, already knowing the answer. His tone cracked, dry as static. Meriden turned to him with an expression void of satisfaction. "Terran submission packet. Section Epsilon 7, line 138. They gave you the pattern 28 cycles ago." Keen said nothing. His claw tips pressed into the armrest surface, not gripping, just anchoring. The lights dimmed automatically as the system shifted into quorum analysis mode. Around the oval chamber, laser plasma displays flared to life, arching translucent arcs of data between seated representatives. A map of the core worlds flickered into focus. Each collapsed or destabilizing sun now blinked red. The waveforms hummed silently across displays, colorless but undeniable. A pale flicker pulsed at the edge of the chamber, and Parek Tovin entered quietly. Neutral systems liaison, detached by treaty from political alignment. His role was not influence, it was observation. He walked with the poise of someone who had memorized every protocol but needed none of them at this moment. He stopped beside Meriden. His voice, as always, carried no accent. "I verified the patterns, line by line. The Earth projection wasn't an estimate, it was a forecast." Keen glanced up. "Speculation doesn't bind this council." Parek didn't blink. Neither does pride. The silence following that hung like ash after a structure fire, cold, invisible, coating everything without being seen. No one applauded. No one protested. Every delegate stared at the matching waveforms rotating above their heads. Keen shifted in his seat. Why wasn't this flagged when submitted? Meriden's tone was clipped, not disrespectful, just tired. Because it came wrapped in language no current parser understood. Earth used terminology from analog harmonics, terminology you dismissed as imprecise. Keen's eye ridges lowered. "And you? How did you decode it?" "I didn't," Meriden replied. "I read it, like a human, out loud. It activated pattern recognition in our fallback AI. The alignment protocol triggered, and the patch, still dormant, trigger conditions unmet." Another assistant stepped forward, head bowed slightly. "Chair, may I suggest we publicly validate the Terran model? We could establish joint review before issuing system-wide alerts." "No," Keen snapped. "We do not validate what was already dismissed." Meriden's eyes narrowed. "Then what's the protocol now? Wait for another 5 stars to die before we stop pretending." Keen rose slowly, his voice thinner. "We seal the submission, archive it, quietly, flag it for internal review and issue a Class 1 information moratorium." Parek turned. "You're going to bury the only working model because it came from a quieter seat." Keen walked to the central podium. "Because we have no proof Earth predicted this intentionally. We don't confirm prophecies. We contain damage." Around the room the heads-up panels rotated again, displaying predicted entropic drift paths. Half of them now intersected inhabited systems. Containment won't hold, Meriden said. These nodes aren't self-repairing. They'll last long enough for our engineers to adapt. You don't understand. These aren't failures. They're mirrors. Keen stopped mid-step. Explain. Meriden pointed to the newest drift pattern. Each waveform collapse doesn't just resemble Earth's model, it matches Earth's reverse-engineered prediction of how stars would fall based on specific lattice decay triggers. Keen frowned. Which means? Meriden didn't answer immediately. Instead he turned to Parik, who nodded. It means Earth didn't theorize the flaw, Parik said. They knew its trigger conditions, which implies they tested the model. Maybe not with stars but with simulations, decades ago, before we upgraded to this lattice standard. Keen exhaled once, and we never reviewed it. Parik's voice grew quieter. Because you called it decorative, ceremonial. A silence took hold again, this time deeper. Meriden stepped toward the inner platform. I've reviewed Earth's relay logs. Over 50 nodes seeded with passive waveform catchers, none active, but all listening. The moment decay triggers reached threshold, the Terran code reacted, not by intervening, but by confirming. Keen's gaze hardened. You're suggesting Earth embedded telemetry into our infrastructure. I'm stating it, Meriden replied, and none of us caught it because it looked like packet optimization. A heads-up stream to Meriden's left blinked, data from node Tau 6, phase instability onset, correlating exactly to Earth's section Epsilon 7 timeline. The council chamber dimmed. Keen turned back to the central command node. Seal the Terran file. Parik spoke, sharp for the first time. You do that, and you turn this council into a memorial committee. Keen didn't answer. In the far end of the chamber, the mirrored displays shifted again, Earth's graphs forming a cascade of mirrored curls, one set overlapping the live collapse data in eerie harmony. The pattern didn't just predict the collapse, it described its rhythm, its tempo, its choreography. These weren't accidents, they were steps, and Earth had written the music, not for applause, for consequence. 3 gone in 8 hours. The core is bleeding. Councillor Vezik's words rang out over the emergency summit transmission, a tremor in his voice betraying what the neutral wording could not. On the central dais, Chair Ralvith Keen's posture was tighter than regulation demanded. His ceremonial crest, once upright in elegance, now slouched forward, a signal of institutional fatigue. Heads-up displays above each delegate shimmered with active feed maps. Zarek 9, Ed Harness Feed, and Valic Trine. All collapsed. Same harmonic spiral, same zero burn echo, no flare signatures, no warning pulses, just stellar silence. Surveillance footage from relay satellites ran on side panels, grainy capture loops of glowing orbits dimming frame by frame. The stars didn't die. They disengaged, like thoughts forgotten mid-sentence. A tribunal assistant spoke into the floor mic, voice monotone. Emergency clause invoked, Section 31, Article 8, quorum threshold reached. Authorization granted to reconvene full diplomatic review with external sovereignties. Keen didn't wait. Summon Earth. Full rights. Override their dismissal. Another aide hesitated. Their last submission was nullified. Standard contact channel remains sealed. Then bypass the diplomatic channel. Invoke summon clause. Parik Tovin, seated 2 rows behind, shifted forward slightly. That clause requires unanimous consent from sovereign chairs. Keen's eyes narrowed. And if they don't reply? Parik's voice carried no emotion. Then we request under procedural duress. Keen gestured sharply. So request it. A moment later, a new line of text blinked onto the center screen. To Terran diplomatic seat, encrypted channel 14. Subject, emergency response request. Status submitted with full council quorum approval. The message auto-routed through legacy bands. Encryption keys unspooled. Earth's old relay system acknowledged receipt. 5 seconds passed. Then 10. Then a single line returned. Immunity Protocol 9 enforced. RM no sound filled the chamber. The message hung beneath the rotating stellar drift maps. Static moved more than the delegates. Keen leaned in. What is Protocol 9? Meriden stood from the lower circle. It's Terran treaty law. Once invoked, Earth cannot respond to any council inquiry unless the requesting body admits legal breach and restores prior dismissed submissions. You're telling me we have to say we were wrong? No, Meriden answered. You have to record it as fact. Someone cursed, soft but audible. Keen sat back, talons tightening around the table lip. The room's ambient hum felt heavier now, like the air had thickened. Behind him, a laser plasma display shimmered with the growing instability wave threading through the inner midline systems. Then override the protocol, he ordered. Council emergency takes precedence. Not under diplomatic immunity, said Parik. Earth's designation remains active. Their legal shield can't be pierced unless rescinded by Earth itself or nullified by treaty violation. We nullified nothing, Keen replied. You dismissed their submission, Parik countered. That's documented. They wrapped their predictive model in a legal annex. You marked it ceremonial. Keen gestured to the tribunal scribe. What's the procedural workaround? The scribe, an older Vexeri, with glinting eye shells, flipped through a laser record strip. There is none, Chair. You already exercised override authority once. That voided future override attempts without external authorization. Keen stood. Then hold the quorum. Force it. The chamber's side doors sealed as security protocols initiated lock-in for full deliberation. A tribunal speaker descended into the floor mount, its voice synthetic and slow. Quorum sealed. Speaker calls Earth. The panel of lights beside the speaker blinked. Red, then amber, then red again. Speaker calls Earth. Red, red. Speaker calls Earth. Red. The tribunal speaker paused, then echoed aloud across all corners of the chamber. Earth declines the floor. 3 times the voice repeated, once for each lost system. Its cadence was neutral, robotic, but its silence between phrases cracked louder than any alarm. Keen sank into his seat, jaw locked. No orders came, no corrections issued. The process had outpaced him. Then we prepare a formal apology, he muttered, nearly to himself. We declare breach. We unlock their submission. No, Meriden interrupted. You can't declare breach without full panel ratification. You need 2/3, and you won't get it. Not with the faces still too proud to mark their own names on the fault line. A counselor across the room barked. Then what do we do? Wait until the galaxy is an echo chamber. Another answered dryly. Seems Earth already built the acoustics. Keen stood again, slower this time. Draft a public unity statement. No blame, no fault, just alignment. Meriden's gaze didn't waver. That won't open Protocol 9. Then find something that will. The chamber lights flickered once. A grid realignment. Or something deeper. Find something, Keen repeated. But Earth had already found everything. And now it was waiting. Not with weapons, not with ultimatums, but with silence structured into law. The floor display shifted again. Earth's flag appeared, not waving, just folded, iconic, untouched, and beneath it, one line of Treaty Annex 66, now glowing with new relevance. Entropy may outlive arrogance, but not the truth left unread. No one moved, no one spoke. The room, like the stars, had entered drift. He's here. The words slipped from the tribunal attendant like a dropped glass. Soft but final. The chamber's ambient lighting recalibrated itself automatically, dimming in anticipation of quorum re-entry. No announcements followed, no fanfare, only the coordinated lock of attention, as heads swiveled toward the primary ingress port. The door did not open quickly. It unfolded. Each panel disengaged along hidden seams, peeling back with geometric grace to reveal a corridor washed in soft spectrum light. No guards, no entourage, just a figure in a charcoal overcoat, walking with the rhythm of a pendulum that had waited too long to swing. Draven Kor stepped inside, not as a diplomat, not as a savior, as a reminder. His boots landed without echo, though the material beneath his feet looked etched from layered obsidian. Eyes followed each pace, not out of awe, out of disbelief. He carried nothing visible, no banners, no documents, no companions. And yet in his left hand, cradled without effort, was an obsidian black drive no larger than a palm. It emitted no hum, no pulse, no beam, but the edges refracted light at odd angles, bending the colors around it, as though space itself refused to acknowledge it directly. Kor did not look up. His gaze remained level, fixed at the center of the tribunal dais, where the council's ceremonial bench curved inward in a semicircle of layered stone and composite. 12 seats occupied, 12 species represented. None spoke, Chair Ralvith Keen watched him approach. His clawed fingers remained interlocked beneath the bench surface, not fidgeting, gripping. Kor stopped exactly 5 paces from the dais. He said nothing. He raised the drive. The room tensed, not visibly, but in the way air becomes heavier in the instant before lightning chooses its target. Several delegates leaned forward. One placed a hand on a silent alarm panel beneath the desk, hesitating. Kor stepped forward again, 1 pace only. He set the drive on the ceremonial dais, specifically, on the treaty seal itself. A fine crackle spread across the surface where the drive touched it, like frost expanding along a metal sheet. Symbols etched into the dais, historical, abstract, mostly unread, flickered with a soft emerald glow. Ancient glyphs that had not responded in decades suddenly shimmered, as if recognizing a pattern they were built to receive. The drive pulsed once, green, then dark. Keen stood slowly. His voice, when it emerged, held the careful balance of forced calm. "Is this a weapon?" Kor looked up for the first time. And still, he said nothing. Behind Keen, 2 advisors ran silent scans from their desk terminals. Data streamed onto their personal heads-up panes. Nothing active, no transmissions, no emissions. The system flagged the object as encrypted, source unknown, access denied. Attempts to brute read its contents failed instantly. Another scan ended in error. Immunity signature detected. Decryption prohibited. The failure icon blinked red on both assistants' panels. Keen's breath slid out slower than intended. "Is there a message?" Kor tilted his head just a degree. It wasn't affirmation. It wasn't denial. The tribunal scribe, an automated relay node embedded in the rear wall, activated as quorum tracking resumed. Its neutral voice rang across the space. "Submission received. Treaty Annex reversal request. Earth delegation." Keen stepped toward the dais. "Under what clause?" The tribunal voice replied. "Immunity Protocol 9. Terms now enforced. Conditional release pending acknowledgement." Kor did not move. Keen looked down at the object again. "We cannot read it unless we accept dismissal error into quorum record," the tribunal system confirmed. "Correct." The drive remained still. Its green shimmer receded to black once more. Around it, no heat, no light, yet the dais beneath had changed. Not melted, not scorched, but the glyphs where the drive had been placed now glowed faintly. Each marking mirrored the waveform patterns from Earth's submission. This wasn't just a delivery, it was a trigger. One counselor, Makra Danos of the Orvith Circle, leaned forward, voice dry as dust. "What happens if we refuse to speak the phrase?" Kor didn't blink. The tribunal scribe answered instead. "Then the patch remains sealed." Another counselor interjected. "And the systems continue to fail." "No response required from Earth," the scribe clarified. Meriden, who had been watching from the side row, stood. He walked forward slowly, stopping beside Kor without ceremony. "I watched 3 suns dim this week. Not burst, just retreat, and you sat there while it happened." Kor looked at him with something resembling recognition, but not apology. Meriden continued. "Why now? Why return at all?" Kor's reply was as soft as it was final. "Because now you're quiet enough to hear it." He turned without haste, walked the same 5 steps in reverse. The tribunal doors responded before he reached them, receding once more into folded geometry. His figure disappeared into the corridor without haste. No final glance. Behind him, the council remained seated. No orders issued, no vote called. The drive remained on the dais, inert and waiting. The room had never been louder in its silence. "If we say it, it becomes precedent." The words dropped from Chair Ralvith Keen like groundstone onto glass. His voice, stripped of defiance, no longer filled the council chamber, it occupied it. The legal advisory tier remained still, watching him from the shadows behind the elevated dais. No one moved, not even the aides who usually darted between consoles whispering data summaries or formatting vote drafts. There was no vote to format. The drive core had left glowed faint green from its place on the treaty seal. It hadn't changed since being placed there. The same dull surface, the same angular frame, and yet it had become heavier than any warhead ever deployed. Meriden stood 1 level below, hands clasped behind his back, staring not at the device, but the ceiling above it. There, old glyphs had begun to light, symbols carved into the council dome centuries prior long ignored. The light came not from projection, but reaction, drawn forth by the legal structure of Earth's immunity clause, hardwired into treaty subroutines that few remembered and none respected. Until now, Perek Tovan stood in the gallery. His voice, when he finally spoke, was quiet and without rhetorical weight. "We are not submitting to Earth. We are validating language we discredited. There's a difference." Keen turned his head slightly. "Tell that to the systems we've lost." "Those systems didn't fall because of Earth," Perek said. "They collapsed because we trusted our arrogance over an offer buried in courtesy." A flicker passed through the drive. The green halo around its base cycled once, then steadied. The glyphs on the dome ceiling began to arrange into a visible ring. Each symbol matched a phrase from the Council's charter, but one stood alone at the top, Dismissal Clause A.17. "Review the activation phrase again," Keen ordered, his voice now a tool, not a weapon. The Tribunal Scribes panel activated, casting a heads-up stream across the central airspace. A monotone AI voice began. "Para Annex 66, Earth's final transmission, stipulates patch activation, only occurs under conditions of full quorum, bound speech and public acknowledgement of the prior error in submission rejection. Specific phrase must be, 'We dismissed Earth's offer.' Phrase must be spoken by a standing chair in session. No embellishments, no synonyms. The system would not allow substitutions." Keen exhaled slowly. His claws tapped once against the panel beside him, the movement stiff with ritual. "If I say this aloud, it enters the public record." "Yes," Meriden said plainly, "and that record will save systems from decaying into silence." Another delegate stirred. It was Mekra Danos of the Orvith Circle, his voice scratched like aged parchment. "Earth used legal symmetry. They required us to bind what we broke. If this works, it means they predicted not only the failure, but our response to it. They didn't win by code," someone muttered behind him. "They won by character prediction." Keen adjusted the ring on his third finger, a movement he'd made out of habit for years. This time it cut. He stood. Silence reigned. Every sensor node in the chamber adjusted. Light bands faded. Heads-up displays stilled. The tribunal dome darkened save for the soft ring of green still glowing beneath the drive. Keen placed both hands on the edge of the central dais. His voice, when it came, held none of its usual cadence. "Record session. Bind quorum. Submit active voice under Clause A.17. This chair confirms the phrase." He paused. It was not for drama. It was to gather the breath of legacy, his own, and the institution's. "We dismissed Earth's offer." There was no applause, no sound, but the drive responded. The chamber lights pulsed once, an artificial heartbeat mapped across structural subnets. Then the glyphs along the ceiling erupted in full, each pulsing in resonance with the center ring. From the drive, a slow release of cascading projection beams unfurled, not visually, but in the substrate of the treaty interface itself. Heads-up panels blinked awake, and each one displayed a synchronized map of the core systems. All failing nodes, over 79 confirmed collapse sites, began registering harmonic stabilization. No commands issued, no code transmitted. Earth had already embedded the mechanism. This was merely the final handshake. A new status appeared. Starwell harmonics recalibrated, 100% sync initiated. Then the Council's internal command infrastructure blinked an unfamiliar message. "Key accepted. Patch unsealed. Truth upheld." Meriden didn't look away from the displays. "They didn't build a weapon," Perek answered without turning. "They built a confession trap." One of the aides behind Keen whispered. "How did they know we'd never accept the offer until everything was falling?" Meriden said nothing. The answer was obvious. Earth had known because Earth had waited, for years, quietly, not to punish, but to be proven. They didn't demand submission. They offered proof, and the Council, drunk on symmetry and lineage, had ignored it, until the phrase became a lifeline. The drive stopped glowing, its surface returned to black, but the glyphs on the ceiling did not dim. The truth, once spoken, had no off switch. Keen remained standing, hands still on the dais, not out of resolve, out of necessity, because the moment he sat back down, it would be real. Earth had not threatened. Earth had not retaliated. Earth had not even spoken. They had waited until the galaxy needed honesty more than pride, and then required them to say it, out loud, together, forever. There's no record of when they left, just that they weren't there anymore. The voice, filtered through tribunal archival tone cleaners, belonged to a minor protocol officer, recounting the final Earth Quorum event. His deposition had been stored for 27 cycles, and re-accessed only once, for historical purposes, not policy. His face never appeared on the display. Just his voice, quiet, measured. As if speaking of a monument no longer standing, inside the treaty preservation chamber, the chair once assigned to the Terran envoy remained vacant. Dust didn't settle here. Filtration systems cycled the air with relentless consistency, but absence had a texture all its own. The seal behind the seat, etched with Earth's legacy glyph, had stopped glowing the moment Core's drive deactivated. It never lit again. A laser plasma display flickered overhead, looping stabilizer data from every affected star system. All nodes had returned to harmonic compliance. None required maintenance. Every corrective was embedded beneath existing infrastructure, activated by nothing more than acknowledgement. Earth had made repair contingent, not on war, not on cost, but on truth. In the tribunal's lower archive hall, Rusk Meriden stood alone, his voice echoing softly as he dictated to a recording node. Clause 72, Earth's system-wide entropic recalibration, activated without contact. No diplomatic follow-up received, no explanation offered. Patch function remains permanent. He turned to face the historical projection wall, where the first Terran waveform submission glowed beside its counterpart collapse charts. Identical in shape, unquestionably predictive. His eyes drifted to the lower annotation, handwritten in ink on the original physical document Earth had delivered long before the Council digitized their archives. Entropy reveals character. The room dimmed slightly as the system recognized sunset above the tribunal roof. Not a natural sun, those were filtered, controlled, but the simulation mimicked how light fades over stone. It cast long, slow shadows across the projection wall, one of which fell over the vacant Earth chair. A system alert pulsed near Meriden's terminal. A passive beacon had been detected. Not from Earth. From a relay node in Sector V Delta, an audio pulse, encrypted in tonal sequences, not a transmission. A legacy signature. He patched it through. What followed wasn't a message. It was a sound. Core's voice. Only once. 6 words. Delivered in a cadence so even it felt like gravity, not speech. Structure, not vengeance. You chose silence. Then the channel cut. No origin trace, no timing marker. Just those 6 words, embedded into comm layer protocol like a seal on an unopened letter. Meriden closed the file. No reply was possible. Elsewhere, in forgotten corners of the midline systems, data analysts continued to submit failed reports, explaining how Earth had corrected entropy drift without accessing lattice control systems. Every theory ended the same way, by accepting that Earth had seen the fault before anyone else, built a solution no one requested, then sat in stillness until the galaxy was quiet enough to admit the flaw. They hadn't forced the Council to bend, they had required it to speak. Once. Out loud. The final copy of Earth's original submission, previously marked ceremonial, had been unsealed and indexed. The Council codified it not under technology, but jurisprudence. It became the first legally binding case of enforced truth. No one could veto it. There was no override. The clause was reclassified as immutable precedent. And Earth never responded. No vessels returned. No transmissions followed. No envoys reappeared. Not even a signature in the relay logs. It was as if their departure had been scripted into the patch. One counselor, reading the logs during the internal debrief, had asked aloud, "Are they hiding?" Meriden had answered with unsettling calm, "They were never hiding. They were documenting us." Decades later, tribunal historians attempting to compile a visual history of the event discovered that every known image of Core inside the Council had corrupted over time. Not erased, just blank. The feed would flicker, faces would freeze, audio would misalign. His figure always disappeared during playback, leaving behind empty footage of an event everyone remembered clearly, but no recording could verify. It was never explained. At a commemorative address marking the formal retirement of the Earth seat, no representatives were sent. The chair remained vacant as intended. The ceremony ended early. The most updated treaty archive now included a clause known as the Core Admission Protocol. It required any new species seeking Council admission to undergo cultural review, specifically, a measured ability to admit documented failure. No review passed without it. One junior delegate once questioned the need for such a condition. An elder clerk replied, "Because Earth didn't win by knowing, they won by waiting until we didn't lie." The Council dome ceiling remained unchanged. The coral glyphs Core's drive awakened still faintly glowed above, even though the device itself was long gone. Some believed it was buried beneath the dais. Others claimed Earth recalled it remotely, but Meriden knew better. He had once opened the drive casing long after activation. It was empty. No components, no transmitters, just etched glass inside, marked with a mirrored waveform and a single line of Terran script. The stars didn't fail. You just wouldn't listen. When he retired, he left that casing in the archive wall without explanation. No plaque, no ceremony. Earth's last known transmission occurred 42 standard cycles after the patch activation. It came not through official bands, but encoded into a pulse signal embedded in a static relay ping during a meteor event over Centaur 3. It was never decrypted, but the audio file, when scrubbed, revealed silence in the shape of voice. The waveform matched Core's tonal pattern, but there were no words, just a rhythm, 6 beats, repeated once. That signal became known as the Silence Protocol. It was archived. It was left alone, because some things are not meant to be answered, they are meant to be understood, and Earth, once called primitive, had understood everything, long before anyone was ready to admit it.